One of the most idiotic claims I've ever heard from a Muslim is that Allah is the God of the biblical narrative. And why? Because Hebrew and Arabic are Semitic languages. Therefore, Il or El or Elohim must be the same God. Hi, I'm Raymond Douglas and welcome to My Man Cave. The Inside Out perspective takes a look at life's challenges and its effects and asks one simple question. What race are you running? You know, when Muslims bring us this topic that the biblical narrative, especially the Old Testament, and we're focusing here on the Old Testament, is the same God. Allah is the same God as the biblical narrative God. And why do they claim that? And that's simply because the Quran tells them that Adam was a Muslim, Abraham was a Muslim, Moses was a Muslim, Jesus was a Muslim. So therefore, they must follow Allah. But the dilemma here is that there is no record of any faith up until the 6th century after Muhammad's death of anyone calling themselves Muslims or Islam or worshipping a God by shouting out Allah Akbar. And this is a dilemma which cannot be reconciled by any Muslim. And when you ask, what about the contradiction? Who was the first Muslim? Was it Abraham, Moses, or Adam, or Jesus? And they go, no, they were the first Muslim for their community. Now that seems very problematic to me, since Muslims and Islam was first defined by Mohammed. So surely Mohammed should be the first Muslim, and you could only be a Muslim after the definition of the faith. And why? The reason is they try to force the Islamic faith into the biblical narrative to get substance for it. And why is that? Because over 50% of the Quran is borrowed text, either from the biblical narrative or outside sources. But here's a further dilemma which you find. When you have a look and you question these inconsistencies which you find in these verbal gymnastics of Muslim scholars who try and explain this away, you get a bigger problem. And that is, when you have a look at these claims, everyone seems to be wrong. So Abraham must have been wrong when he was sacrificing his son as an instruction from his God, who he understood as the I Am, or Yahweh. So Moses also must have been wrong when he heard the voice in the burning bush and he asked, who must I say is sending me? And the true God of creation said, the I Am, Yahweh. What's quite dramatic here is that the Quran claims that Muslims must follow Abraham or the Abrahamic faith. Yet at the same time, the Quran also says in Surah 367 that Abraham was not a Jew. And although they also claim that in their traditions that Abraham was involved in setting up the first Kaaba, or their place of worship in Mecca, the Quran also testifies that Abraham was never ever in Mecca or in Arabia. So the key point I'm trying to point out here, no matter which way you look at it, it always seems to be that the Quran must be right in light of any other evidence. So we kind of get, oops, Abraham must have been wrong, and oops, Moses must have been wrong because the Quran says so, and oops, Jesus must have been wrong because the Quran says so, and oops, Paul must have been wrong because the Quran says so, and also, oops, history must have been wrong because the Quran says so. Why? Because Muhammad said so. And Muhammad was illiterate, so he must be right. Seems like anything that is wrong supports the Islamic faith. So the more wrongs you get, the more perfect Islam becomes. Can you imagine this? Sorry, just a thought off the cuff. Can you imagine an Arab on his camel going through the desert from wherever to wherever. And the more wrong turns he takes, the closer he gets to his destination. It doesn't make sense, does it? But this is what Muslims want you to believe. It doesn't matter about history. It doesn't matter about the scholars. It doesn't matter about the writings which are affirmed as inspired works in the Quran, like the Old and the New Testament. It must be wrong. And the biggest error they make is that if Abraham was a Muslim, but Christians cannot be, but we worship the same God. Why? Because the Quran testifies that Christians worship Allah, Jesus, and His mother Mary. Now, I know no Christian which does that. We worship Yahweh, the true God of creation. And that is seen and forced upon Christians throughout the biblical narrative. One just needs to read it. And this idea of Muslims forcing their ideology onto the world can be seen in current events. Let's just take the example of the current riotings which started on Wednesday in India because of a person's post on Facebook. Apparently, as far as the reports go, a person made a post which offended the Muslims. So the Muslims in the area decided to take up arms and riot. And in the rioting, 3 people have been killed, a police station burned down, and a number of police have been injured. Why? Because they didn't like a comment on Facebook. But if you dig a little bit deeper, the comment on Facebook, the way I understand it, came about because this guy's home was attacked by Muslims. And you see how it's clouded the issue? Forget about the extreme violence which is portrayed. It's now about the person's poor comment and not about the Islamic action. And it's all clouded in this whole political thing, while the government sits back and says, we're not going to support or say anything for the leftists, and we're not going to say anything for the people on the right, because either way, a party might get offended. So they'll just sit on it and hope that the trouble get washed away. In the meantime, people die in the process. And this is the Islamic standard. But what is even more interesting, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that it's only 14.2% of the population in India which are Muslims. And yet, this is the theme of their reaction. And this is what Dr. Peter Hammond says. His statement is very clear. When a population gets between the point of 10 and 20%, this is how they react. After reaching 20%, expect When Muslims reach 10% of the population, they will increase lawlessness by means of complaint about their conditions. Have a look at the Paris car bombings. And any non-Muslim action that offends Islam will result in uprisings that threatens people. Look, for example, at the Amsterdam Mohammed cartoons, for example, and now this Facebook post in India. After reaching 20%, expect hair-trigger rioting, jihad militant formations, sporadic killings, and even church and synagogue burnings. In this case, we've got a police precinct which was burnt. And as I say this, folks, I also want to draw your attention to, although the majority of Muslims in the world support peaceful negotiations and claim to be a religion of peace, 71% of those Muslims state they prefer Sharia law. Sharia law means that Muslims may act as they've just done in India. And I refer you once again to Surah 98:6, that if you a Jew or a Christian or any other faith The Quran, or Allah of the Quran, says you are the worst of creatures. That's the curse of Allah. That's the curse the Quran places against you and gives Islam and Muslims the right to go and destroy and annihilate you. Folks, I want you to be very clear on what I'm saying here. Look at the progression or the development of Islam. First, it is, we're pushing our faith in the name of God onto you. And as you get comfortable with that, we're going to push this onto you. And as we get comfortable with that, we're going to push that onto you. And before you know it, you are in the Islamic State. And take locally here in South Africa, just last week, through a botched raid, another 5 ISIS members are still on the run, linked to the killings at the mosque in Johannesburg in December. That's ISIS killing their own faith group at a mosque. And this is Islam in action. And the question I leave you with, as always, is, what race are you running?